Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Cancel culture. Is it dangerous? Well, that's what we're talking about on today's episode. We've got to look at this because, folks, the reality is it's at the forefront of society. And in many ways, Lance and I feel it is part of polarization in the media, in our everyday lives, and in the world of education. And those are the segments that we're going to break it down. What is cancel culture? Do you really understand what it is? Is it dangerous? What role does it play in the news media? What role does it play in education? And how can we as a nation become better? Well, that conversation, of course, could not begin without
True Chat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Okay, folks, the key today is don't cancel us, all right? You've got to listen and hopefully learn and do some thinking. And that's going to be the motto. It's the motto of every show, but particularly today, because no matter what we say, I'm sure we're going to, quote, step on some toes. But that's our point here is to have a Socratic discussion, the ancient philosopher, where we throw out some questions and we have some debates, and hopefully it makes us all better people and in turn makes us a better society. So we had two words of the day. One was the phrase U.S. Constitution. The other is respectful. We'll go, because the word of the day, we'll just go with respectful, RESPECTFUL. Respect, made famous by, isn't that Aretha Franklin's song? RESPECT.
Ah, yes.
Isn't that Aretha Franklin? So we should play that right now. Can the Devin Creature pop that one up for us?
I think it's a royalty issue, Lance. I'm not sure that we didn't get the pre-authorization from our legal team and content team, but that is kind of the point today, right? Is this idea of respect, but also the open exchange of ideas. And I think, by the title of this show, people are going to already surmise that Lance and I have a position because it's called The Danger of Cancel Culture. I think that part of what we want to do today, and we've done this with other stuff, Lance, is to not necessarily say that there's not a time where, you maybe have to remove a person or an influence from your life, but to say, look, there's a real danger to this sort of thinking, holistically speaking. And what is the motivation of it in the first place? And before we can talk about how this has altered the media landscape, how it's changing the college and university environment, we first need to understand, what are we talking about? Because there's plenty of friendly redneck liberals out there that are like, what the heck is cancel culture? Or maybe they've heard about somebody being canceled and they don't understand what that means. I'll be honest with people. I have a decent understanding of it, but since really this is to the credit of the great Generation Z, Gen Zers, it seems most appropriate that we ask a Gen Z to explain to us, for those stupid millennials and dumb Gen Xers and ignorant boomers out there, what the heck is cancel culture. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to the Devin Creature. In your estimation, Devin, what is cancel culture?
So what cancel culture is to me is where someone somewhere, they make a mistake and people see it, it gets spread around, and people decide to cancel them. And what that is pretty much in essence, old school shunning or taking that person's career and trying to get them out of it. In some way, just trying to affect their life in a negative way. So, because they need to have accountability for the actions that they have done. So that's pretty much what cancel culture is. But how it's applied is a much different story. Some people like to take it a little bit more to the extreme than others do. And
just to be clear, you said, and I think this is true in some cases, that it's when somebody makes a mistake, but it can also be when somebody is arguing something or saying something that they believe and other people not liking whatever that is, and then practicing the nature of canceling them. So in other words, the person doing it didn't look at what they were doing as a mistake, but other people see it as not okay. So then they get canceled. I mean, it could be because sometimes people actually misspeak and then, people jump on to what they're
like. They don't leave any room for any misunderstandings that they have if they even just use the wrong word, like total accident. That does happen, although I don't think a lot of people can play on that.
So ye without sin cast the first stone. That's what comes into my head is that where are our teachings here? Who of us has not done something like that and had to ask forgiveness, because we all make mistakes, and you're going to go after. This is somebody who, I've heard it, I was teasing with Justin, and I'm not real woke on this one, but probably not using that right either. But I'm like, okay, to hear Devin, as you said that was, well, they did this and this and this, and we're going to ruin their career. And it's like, what gives you that right? And B, where is your forgiveness for the human race where we made mistakes? So what part of that am I missing or not understanding?
Well, I wanted to ask Devin, because I think, Lance, something that's important to understand, and this is where I think some of cancel culture gets confusing for people, is there's different components to it, right? There's the side of somebody made a mistake, right? That they are truly and sincerely apologizing for, like maybe they did it when they were young and now they're, it's coming out now and people are canceling them as a result. So there's that kind of, hey, I did this thing, right? Somebody's owning up to it and I regret doing it, but I get canceled because of whatever it is. So there's that. But then there's also the other side of people get into an argument or they're debating different sides and somebody's not sorry, right? Somebody still believes what they've always believed. And then because of whatever that is, they get canceled. And that's kind of the example that comes to mind when we talk about the President Biden's wife, that situation, and whether or not she should be addressed as Dr. Biden or just Mrs. Biden, because that article from the Wall Street Journal that sparked this kind of new discussion about that, that author is not apologetic for having written the article, right? They believe what they said in the article and they're being quote unquote canceled as a result of that. So I think that's important to understand. There's kind of those two different situations, and we want to talk about both of them. But I did want to ask Devin, is this anything, has anybody ever canceled you, or have you ever canceled anybody? If not, have you ever had friends where that's occurred? And have you ever heard about that from other people?
So I personally have not been canceled to my knowledge.
That you're aware of, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe someone out there has been trying, but have I ever canceled anyone either? No, I've never really even knew what it was until earlier this year when I saw a favorite YouTuber of mine get canceled, and I was like, what? So yeah, that was a whole experience. I mostly witnessed it in that way. I've had a couple friends mention here or there, like, yeah, we should just cancel them. Like from a friend-wise perspective. And I'm just like, you're not even really looking into the whole situation. It's just like, for some reason, no one wants to leave that room of improvement that people can have, that they can get better.
So if I decide I don't want to talk to somebody anymore, I've canceled them. I mean, that's gone on. That's gone on for decades, for centuries, since the beginning of mankind. There are people you get along with and people you don't get along with. So, I mean, how is this different? Explain it to the old guy. How is this different?
Because Devin brought up YouTube, and that's exactly what I was thinking. It's the public nature of doing it to inform the world that you are canceling somebody because of XYZ. In other words, you're trying to rally people to your side. So where the difference, Lance, where you're thinking about, right, well, I've made that decision before in life to not talk to somebody or not engage with somebody. But generally speaking, my guess is you haven't taken out an ad in the newspaper to try to rally people
that's
to shun someone.
Right. It's my own personal decision. I made that decision. I turned and walked down the hallway or whatever. It's not society's business who I decide to talk to and don't talk to.
But I think what the issue is that with social media being around, a lot of people feel like the need to publicly let people know that there's something wrong with this person and to stay away from them. So in a way, it's like old school shunning that we're doing.
Part of the reason it exists, to Devin's point, Lance, is because social media, YouTube, because those things exist, it makes it possible for people to say, well, I'm going to announce to the world that I am canceling so-and-so, and here's why. And I think that you should join me in cutting them out. And this is another thing that happens, Devin, and you've probably seen this, is people will inform others that if you do not also cancel this person, then you will be canceled because you are complacent then in their actions. So in the other words, it's that whole Lance, right? If you're not with us, then you're against us. And if you're not willing to publicly be on our side, then you're on their side. And then we will cancel you for having supported them. And that's where it just, that's the balloon effect, right? That's where we talk about the danger. That right there is the danger, because before you know it, it's become this huge thing that's encompassing sometimes millions of people. I mean, some of these YouTube cancel things that have gone on are crazy. I mean, they will take, Lance, channels that, had 10 million subscribers and cut them down to 500,000 people that are following a channel then. The reason they lost so many people is not because so many people actually had a problem with it. It's because those people believe we have to cancel that person now. And that's the whole thing. It becomes not even about the merit. It's just, well, I don't want to get canceled, so then I'm going to be on the side of getting rid of this person. It's, once the writing's on the wall, by God, cut them out and say that you're cutting them out because you don't want to risk the association.
Well, I totally understand what you both have said. So I understand the situation. I will withhold my comments until we get into the next segment or third segment. I'll show some restraint, but thank you for explaining it to me. I definitely have some thoughts on it. And whenever we make this move, or if you have another question for me, but the audience can stay tuned and I'll let them know how I feel about what you said now that I understand it in a much clearer vision.
The danger of cancel culture. That's what we're talking about. We're going to look at how it impacts the media and also how it impacts education. Perhaps two of the places that it is most prevalent. We've got a lot more to discuss. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
The Wall Street Journal writes, quote, "There is a clear difference between holding people accountable for what they say and canceling them. Accountability allows for redemption. Canceling constitutes a hatred-fueled public shaming that aims to ruin a person's life. It ignores moral development." They've caught in some flack this year. The Wall Street Journal has. If you're new to the program, or maybe if you just haven't made this observation for yourself yet, the two sources that we most frequently use are the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Those historically newspapers and now ever growing digital content creation platforms. Those are the sources that Lance and I most frequently turn to, in part because their editorial boards sit on the left and right sides of the opinion section, while we feel that their news reporting, generally speaking, is mostly down the middle. The Wall Street Journal has been going through this. They've had a letter that was signed by some 280 people at the Wall Street Journal, criticizing the opinion pages and saying, the points of view that you're promoting are not in line with everybody's thinking here, and we don't like it, and you should stop doing it. And basically, this was a response from the editorial board saying, and this is again from the piece itself, quote, "These pages won't wilt under cancel culture pressure." In other words, and they also took a stab in one of their recent pieces at the New York Times for having wilted under public pressure when it removed one of its more conservative writing opinion page writers. And this, Lance, is where we talk about the danger of cancel culture in the media, right? Because again, and I think this is so important for people to understand the following, quote, while my instinct is to support free speech, that right shouldn't extend to hate speech or singling out marginalized communities. Opinions are one thing. It's entirely different to use abusive or threatening language that expresses prejudice on the basis of race, sex, gender, or religion. Language has long been an oppressive force used to disparage marginalized groups. The diction Americans have used to speak about minority groups often has a negative connotation. For example, using the word Oriental to describe people from East Asia relegates their existence to that of an object, like an Oriental-style rug. It reduces a group of people from diverse cultures to one stereotype of an exotic land filled with strange wonders. The rise of cancel culture signals that the weight of language is finally being recognized. It is bewildering that prominent figures from YouTube stars and children's book authors to corporate executives are upset when the public disagrees loudly with their bigoted and prejudiced sentiments. This is a person that I felt like was kind of in between these two, saying that there's merit to the idea that what you say, right, you should be held accountable for. At the same time, to use that for the purpose of destroying someone, and that's the intention of it, rather than to achieve positive change, that's where the danger comes in.
Well, I'm just going to tell you right now that this episode's over because I'm canceling you.
Oh, okay.
And
got it.
For reading that. And so I'm done. And
can
so
I cancel you for canceling me?
You can finish the show. Right. My point in doing that's a little satire for those of you that, are aware of that and know that word. The point is if we don't have this discussion, if that gentleman wrote that, then they're responding to what was in there before. And so we're having a give and take of opinion, which is what respectful is all about. Okay. So for them to cancel or me to cancel or Justin to cancel, then the respectful conversation stops. And then we don't move the arrow on society, in my opinion, whatsoever. But if you cancel someone, the way I'm understanding this, then I'm not ever exposing myself to any differences of opinion. And then how do I grow as a person? And then my only other thought real quickly here is that when I pick up a newspaper, and I know I'm one of the dying breed, but even if you're reading online and it's an editorial or it's an opinion, then it's not news. And there is something to the freedom of speech and saying it. And we talked about this before, and folks, listen very carefully here. There are a lot of things that are said that I don't agree with and that I think are wrong and that I think are harmful to people. But who am I to decide? I can decide for myself. Who am I to decide for others? And my real fear is that one day, if I don't defend other people's right to speak, then someone will come after my right to speak. They won't like what I have to say. And so we have to defend speech. We have to defend writing that we don't agree with and talk about why we don't agree with it. And that doesn't seem right to me, and it doesn't seem good for our nation and for us as a human race.
And that, Lance, right there is exactly what made me think about when we talk about the media, what's the danger of it in the media? You and I are constantly talking about how we dislike the polarized media, right? Especially the cable news networks. Well, guess what, folks? Cancel culture only feeds that. No, it didn't necessarily create it. I think that the nature of us as a nation having different opinions created a polarized media, right? But we are feeding it. We are showing businesses that are in the market for the distribution of information that what society is looking for is not to be informed, but rather to only listen and to feel what we already think to be true. And that is incredibly dangerous, because if you change what the media distributes to be only the stuff that you want to hear, then two things. One, you don't become as good at defending your point of view because you've not been exposed to the other side. And you don't know if your point of view is really as valid as you think it is. And that's the whole point of why Lance and I read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times both. Because if we just read one, or if we only read the opinion pages, right, we would not be doing a good service to our listeners if we said, well, we're just going to turn to the opinion pages and that's all we're going to use. We're just going to use the Wall Street Journal opinion pages from now on. And folks, I've watched this play out. I've talked some about, I have different family members that have used different sources. And I can tell you, Lance, I had this conversation the other day. I'm not going to name them, but, I was having this conversation the other day and this person said to me, I've been using the New York Times app, and one of the things I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 months is that I really like how things are labeled, whether they're news or opinion. And it's like, yes, that's the point. And that's part of what we're missing in the media ecosystem, particularly cable news. And that's not something, by the way, folks, that's unique to the New York Times. If you have the Wall Street Journal app or other major respectable sources like USA Today, they label those things too. And it's like, yeah, because that way what you're looking at.
To me, the piece you missed, and you can please correct me if you don't see eye to eye here, but the piece you missed about what's caused this cancel culture is social media technology. That's the thing. And it goes back to the beginning of our discussion where years ago, I could be walking down the hallway, and if I was about to confront someone that I didn't want to be, I could turn around and go the other way. And now I was the only person who knew that I did that, that they hadn't even seen me or whatever. I just made the decision and I did it for my own self and for my own self-interest. But with social media and the way you described it and defined it to me in the first segment, now I can do it and I can get all these other people to do it and threaten them that they're going to be canceled as well if they don't, because I have social media. And so I think one of the driving forces, and this is just my thought for how I'm understanding the situation, has to be social media, has to be the technology that allows us to voice this opinion instead of just making it a personal decision. Now, I don't know. Did I miss something, or did you mean that when you were talking, or is that a new idea that you hadn't thought of?
We talked about it a little bit in the first segment, that part of what's enabled cancel culture is the rise of social media. But I think it's important for people to note, to your point, Lance, earlier, right? This is not a new thing. It's just a thing that's become more extreme because of what technology has enabled and what the news media has perpetuated, right? Because really, again, the concept of cancel culture, like Devin explained it, is really just old school shunning. I mean, that's what it is. Except now, instead of, you talking to one or two people and telling them, yeah, I don't associate with that person because, I've got a difference of opinion with them and I don't like being around them. Now I take to, Twitter or to Facebook or to whatever social media I'm using, right? And I tell thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of people that I do not like this person, that I will not associate with them, and that if you are not with me, you are against me. And that's this, evolution of, maybe where you were at, Lance, where you would stay quiet, right? But you would choose to cut somebody out, but you might not talk about it with anybody other than your spouse. And then maybe, by the time we get to, Gen X or millennials, it's, we're going to, tell a couple of friends about it, and just make them aware that, hey, watch out for this person. And then Gen Z comes along and says, hey, we grew up with social media. We're not really even any good at talking to people in person. So we are going to use social media to amplify that message. And again, not just to remove somebody from our life, but really, and this is, let's call it what it is, right? It's the goal of tearing another person down. That is the purpose of doing it, is to shame them publicly, to make it known that they are a bad person. And that, I think, stems from some of those, what Lance and I have talked about, the worst inclinations of human behavior, right? Which is this idea that if you made me feel bad, then the right thing for me to do is to make you feel worse. because that is how we fix things.
My grandma would not be happy. If my grandma was alive today, she would not be happy, because that is not what she taught me in any shape or form. That's totally out of character for the moral and ethics that I was brought up with. I don't disagree with you. I think you're spot on. I mean, I think what you're saying is the way people feel, but that is so out of touch with the way I was brought up by my elders.
You have to stand up for what you think, but you can take the high road and still be critical without just giving in to opposition and without eliminating opposition. That's the thing that we miss is, now, again, to what we've talked about before, though, that's more difficult. And we're in a society where we want to take the path of least resistance. So it's much easier. And in some ways, probably for some people, that instant gratification, right? It's much more immediately gratifying to publicly shame somebody, to get a bunch of people on your side, and to make somebody else feel worse than you felt. That gets you a lot of immediate satisfaction for many of the wrong reasons, but nonetheless, it does. We still got to talk about cancel culture, though, in education. This is the one Lance hasn't blown a gasket yet, folks, but it might be coming. It might be coming, because if there is a place on planet Earth where discussion is designed to exist, supposedly it's in education, but does it? Does it really? Well, to find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Cancel culture is poisoning modern discourse, according to an editorial report in the Wall Street Journal. It goes on to explain college students have all experienced this. A lecture hall that stays silent even as the professor tries to provoke discussion and debate on controversial issues. How can we hope to generate a diversity of ideas if we fear retaliation for any dissent? So long as the threat of lifelong condemnation hangs over our heads, we cannot.
All I can think of is this wonderful book that I read a couple of years ago. It's entitled The Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. Long title there, but these two gentlemen wrote about this exactly. And this has been going on, especially in higher education, for a number of years. This is not new at all. And unfortunately, what it's doing is, I'm just thinking back to when I taught at the high school level and for a few years at the college level. My whole method of teaching was Socrates, was the Socratic method. And that is, you have people learn by asking them questions and challenging their ideas. And that's when growth and learning takes place. And what you just read, Justin, says that we can't do that anymore. That's not even, is it hard to do, but society doesn't even allow it. That you're not allowed to challenge my thought process. Well, doggone it. If we don't do that, then you just think everything that you think is right. And who said that? I mean, who actually believes that you're protected to think whatever you want without anybody questioning it? That's the antithesis of any kind of learning that I've ever read about or ever structured. Hence the title of this book, that we're coddling these people, that we're making them feel safe, and we're not challenging their thought processes. And we're doing that because we care about them and we love them and we don't want them to face the harsh realities of the world. So we're going to stop all of this stuff from going on that they're going to feel insecure about. And by doing that, we're setting them up to fail. We're setting them up to not be successful, because when they go out in the world, they're going to run into things like this, and we're not giving them the tools necessary in education to deal with it when they run into people who don't agree with them. And then we just are further exacerbating the problem and the issue, because well intentions, right? But the whole point here is that if we don't take it from the youngest levels and teach people that this is part of the maturation process. This is part of the learning process. This is how we become better humans. Then what we get is where we get people now politically in two camps who don't talk, and there's no compromise and nothing gets done. And who suffers? We the people. I didn't get too bad, did I?
No. I thought that was, it's like a pressure release valve, right? So the gasket wasn't blown because the release valve, started crying out and said, "Hey, we gotta let out a little steam pressure here and prevent the gasket from exploding." So, I see he's holding up the book, folks. He's telling people, you got to look at this. And I was just writing down, I think it stretches to every corner of our reality right now, because when you think about it, and as you were talking, I'm like, and that's exactly the whole point of the reason that you don't want to do this. The biggest reason is because doing it does not eliminate the other side. It may just eliminate your awareness of the other side. And while that may serve you in the short term, it is bad not only for you, but for all of us in the long term, because the other side doesn't go away. You're just no longer aware of their operations. And that's dangerous, because that's how we get to this misunderstanding, right? How can half of the country so strongly support Biden and strongly support Trump? How is that possible? How do these people that I know and care about, how could they do that? Well, part of the reason that you don't know is because you don't talk about it, because you opted to cut those sorts of people out of your life. And we do it in everything. And I think it is one of those, Lance, the whole reason that you and I are trying to quote unquote cancel the idea, right, of red and blue states is because it's a farce, it's a lie, and it's used by the power brokers to stay in power. And that's what people, I think, fail to understand. The motivation behind cancel culture is, in my opinion, morally absurd. Is there times where you need to eliminate someone from your life? Yes. Does that mean that it's your job as the moral arbiter of the universe to make sure that everybody else hates them? And particularly, and this is where I struggle with it the most, Lance, when people are seeking forgiveness and you opt not to bestow it, especially if it's not, again, if somebody's done something 100 times, right, and they just keep saying sorry, but they just keep doing it, that is different. That's different. If what happens now where somebody did something 20 years ago and, they said something that we don't like or that we disagree with, and now we ruin their career and we say, you're no longer allowed to be part of society. And they say, well, whoa, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to. I think I've grown as a person and I'm not doing it now. Yes, folks, there's nuance here. Sure. Different situations are different, but at the same time, too often I think we make those leaps and say, yeah, we just don't forgive people anymore.
If I'm not a better person at 30 than I was at 20, then something's wrong. And now here I am approaching 60. If I'm not a better person now than I was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 10 years ago, why do we live our lives as humans? We should be striving to become a better person. So have I made mistakes in the past? Yes. And I've tried to apologize for them and not make them again.
And learn from them.
Right. And learn from them. Isn't that part of growing old and maturing? And you should be a better person as you get older. So to throw someone out for something they did 20 or 30 years ago, you're not giving them credit for growing as a person. Now, to your point, if they haven't grown, and the same thing you're upset about, well, they did this when they were 30 and they did it when they were 31 and 32 and 33 ad infinitum. I see your point, but I would hope that our goal in each one of us is every year to grow and become a better person. So it should then behoove us to forgive somebody for the sins of youth.
I think there are instances where canceling, quote unquote canceling, where we're saying, look, this person, right, shows no remorse. They show no interest in becoming better, and they show no interest in being respectful in engaging with me. I see the merit in that. Okay. But when I say that the concept of cancel culture holistically is morally bankrupt, it's because it goes back to that notion that I am better than you and that I have the right to decide for society what is right and wrong. And I just don't think that we as individual people have that right. And that could be, that goes back to our whole conversation with Timothy Beale, Lance. I mean, that's what it made me think earlier this year, right? This fallacy that the Bible is a book of answers and not a book of questions. It's the whole notion that in all these institutions, right, we've devised this idea that there is black and white, right and wrong, this or that, me or them, us versus them, right? All these different concepts. And there are instances where those things are true, right? Because it's never, never, it's never, always, and never, never. There we go. See, we're really pulling lots of Devons today, getting the words all jumbled. But that's the point, right? Is there are instances where those things are true, and there are instances where you need to cut people out. At the same time, you do not get, we don't move forward as a society. You don't make change by cutting people out and cutting them down. And that's what this is about, is as long as Lance and I are on this show, we are not going to foster an environment where it's not okay for you to think differently. And guess what, folks? That extends to this conversation. Hopefully, if you're a strong proponent of cancel culture and you're listening, hopefully you're still with us, because we want you to be here. Because we believe that just because Lance and I think that this is a bad idea doesn't mean that you have to think the same thing, and doesn't mean that you're not welcome to participate in the conversation, as long as you don't resort, right, to being hateful toward us or being abusive, as long as you maintain our one prerequisite. And what is that prerequisite, Lance? What's that thing that we're trying to do universally here?
Well, across the board on all the shows here at True Chat, our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful, there's that word, respectful conversations. And we hope we do it. We hope we do it every time we step up to the mic and we start to talk. And we hope you, the listening audience, that's why you come in and listen with us, is because you're not going to hear us rant and rave about things. And we're going to have this respectful conversation. We're going to take in both sides and let you think along with us and come to some kind of conclusion that's right for you. And you can either agree with us or disagree with us. Just listen. Okay. Listen and think about it. That's the key. And if you like that concept and you're enjoying it, you need to tell other people about it, because the more we do this, the better nation and the better world we can create. And if people say, well, how can I listen to these guys? Remember, we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is a podcast released Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. in the Eastern Time Zone. We're also a syndicated radio program heard across the United States. So check your local talk market, see if they carry The State of Us. If they don't, call them up and tell them they should. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our recording producer, Devin McCain, editing producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.